thought about it is about experimenting. It's about creating something different. I mean, because when we get down to the point of making just another fantasy game, then really what is going to stand out about it? So those same combinations of trying to combine an MMO and a shooter. For us, it was trying to do a kids platformer and an MMO all into the same thing. It is approaching it with that sort of open mind. It's may not be your thing, honestly, but we're trying to spread it as much as possible. So we're not just creating the next fantasy MMO and it's the same genre as everything else. But yeah, no, honestly, there have been pages. We have taken pages from our forums, especially one. I can't remember which one particular poster that we were going through every single detail because he had given us such good feedback and very particular on everything, as opposed to a lot of the 10-year-olds who we got.
the chronological and mental 10-year-olds, not always the same group.
And the bottom line is you never quite know what's going to work either. I mean, it's really interesting to see what people respond positively to that you never even would have thought of.
Yeah, Will Wright gave a really great talk one time when we talked a bit about this. Imagine you have kind of a plane and you have different hills, and how high the hill is how fun it is. Well, you kind of find a little, little area where you go, okay, this is pretty fun. The problem is there might be a taller hill over here. The problem is in order to get from where you are now to over there, you have to kind of go through a little valley. Things might get a little less fun. I think that's one of the, again, kind of what I said before, be patient. If we're going to explore new things, sometimes it's going to be a little less fun than the absolute maximum fun you had in, say, World of Warcraft or EverQuest 2 or whatever your favorite game is. Be a little patient because we might actually get to, of course, the downside is, we might think, oh, there's a tall hill over there, and no, it's actually another indentation.
I would actually answer that question from the Dragon Con perspective. One of the biggest things we do, especially here at the MMO track, is we love to hear from fans who are passionate about their games. So if anybody in this room is pissed off that your game does not have a panel, make sure you talk to us for next year, because we're always looking for knowledgeable, intelligent, passionate, fired up people who want to come here and talk about their favorite game. That's how we put this on, because we're a fan con, so that's a big deal. And we have another question.
Wow, my voice sounds terrible. I had a question concerning, well, The Escapist had an article, get ready for the future of MMOs, and I'm sure you're quite sick of hearing this stuff, but one thing he discussed is, in order to lead towards innovation, you have to have low cost, which will produce risks, more risk takers, which will then produce innovation. So it's this cyclic thing. And there are a lot of comments right now, especially I think within, not necessarily WoW, but WoW-like MMOs, about the stagnation of the current video game market. And I know, big man over there with a global agenda and kind of not taking an MMORPG, but more MMO insert genre here, sort of approach is one way to counter that. And I was wondering what you guys think about kind of innovation and kind of where it's heading.
I think that is a huge question, but it's something that our development teams, all of them, discuss every single day, every single week. Every monthly business meeting that I attend for our various MMOs, there's always discussions on what's next. There's also, and this is an interesting thing to keep in mind, if we look at our SOE's oldest MMO, EverQuest, those players have made it, speaking of feedback, those players have made it very clear that they do not want their game to change. Most of these guys don't use cell phones yet, I think. I mean, but that's also valid. That is a game that we will keep going for 100 years as long as there's enough people to support it. And at the same time, we're always looking at ways to innovate to bring in the next game. Are we giving up on fantasy because there's so much of it? No. EQ Next is in the works, but exactly how it's going to be presented, what sort of gameplay, what sorts of interactions, there's a lot of innovation going on right now in trying to address those needs. But there is definitely always going to be a market for fantasy, and there's always going to be a market for science fiction, and there's going to be a market for giant robots, and it's a matter of deciding where your company wants to go and how much money you have to invest in it. And sometimes, I have to say, as Jason and I were just in the Free Realms monthly business meeting, And it comes back over and over again. The smaller dev teams can actually be more agile on that front, and they can do some amazing things that a really heavy, huge dev team can't because they're too stratified. So it's a good thing that there's large gaming companies, teeny gaming companies, guys who work out of their basements. Somebody's going to make the game that you're looking for next.
Yeah, I think one of the important things, though, is to, there's what people say they want, and there's what people will actually support. I think, you need to be very careful about that, especially as a business. There's been a lot of people that have kind of chased after, we were talking about Jumpgate Evolution, and Scott Brown, the president of NetDevil, was talking one time, he's like, Jumpgate is this really great space shooter MMO. He talked about, he's really passionate about that. He thought there was a lot of demand for it, and then he looked at the actual sales numbers of space flight sim games. And he's like, oh, well, I probably wouldn't have made that game if I had looked at those numbers. So I think I think innovation is one of those things that a lot of people say they want, and I think a lot of people do want it, but not quite as big as the people say. That said, as a developer, I am all for innovation, because you know what? I've played various incarnations of WoW before it was called WoW. Back when it was called EQ, when it was called Diku Mud, when it was called all these other games that are very similar in that similar vein. I like to play different games. That's what kind of keeps me going as a developer. So personally, I really like to take risks with innovation. I think what you said in that article is exactly right. You need kind of a lower cost. But on the flip side, kind of going back to the audience, what the audience can do to help support, you need to look for those games. You need to, and even if it's something that might, the graphics, the graphics are not that pretty, and maybe, if it's something that sounds interesting to you, jump on it with both feet, please. You don't necessarily have to write big checks and give them to the developers, although we will accept those, of course. But make sure you go and you support and you let people know, because not only your support, your vocal support, will show that there's interest in this. And if the developer can say, hey, look, I've got interest in this, then it becomes easy to go to an investor or to give a small business loan or whatnot and say, look, this is the number of people interested, this is what my projections can be. But if you're just kind of going out there and wandering in the wilderness, sometimes it can be really, really scary.
Yeah, just 2 points on innovation. One, on the particular innovations, I agree in that people often ask for a lot of innovations, but again, if they can't get their head around it, and it doesn't match the conventions that they spent their gaming career mastering, then that can be confusing. So you have to pick them really carefully. And if you're interested, we've got a whole panel on Sunday on shooter versus RPG and global agenda, and we can talk about kind of our balance trade-offs there. But then there's to the escapist article, the industry is really struggling with how they can innovate and do experiments more quickly. And we mentioned Farmville, and everyone laughed, but I mean, the entire Game Developers Conference last year was all about the industry saying, holy crap, what are we going to do about Farmville? Because that platform of Facebook allows a developer to quickly put an experiment out there and get feedback and iterate and find out what the people want, find out those hills of fun that we were talking about. And a lot of the industry is stuck in this an older model that where you're taking a huge risk and you don't know until it's out there, and then we have some of the perceived failures that we've talked about. So it's all about how can the game industry move quicker, be more agile, put out experiments with less cost, which means less risk, and then pour more resources into things that work. And different companies are trying different ways to do that. So.
Yeah, back to Farmville, actually, I know some of the people out there, and just the way they put things in and how quickly it goes, it's amazing, but even thinking about doing something that quickly in any one of these games, it would take us so much time to get it out there, and by the time it does, it fails, it flies, whichever one it goes, it's too late, So that smaller development, smaller cost is definitely a great breeding space for something that can be turned into, once it does get the proper reception, something much bigger.
And for the forum, when you're working on a platform that's not Facebook or web, a lot of things that we'll do is we'll float an idea on the forums, and we'll take and do a survey to our whole mailing list, and we'll look very, very seriously at what comes back. And that's a little bit short of actually building the feature, but we can concept test the feature as quickly as possible and see what comes back. So, yeah, per the other advice, take your fan and player responsibility serious there, because developers are listening more and more to that.
Yeah, so never mind the next WoW killer. If any of you in the audience is working on the next Farmville killer, come see me after this.